tomorrow, and Neil Williamson is beaming with pride. In fact, when the cameras go on, you will see a freshly haircutted Neil Williamson. Not a coincidence, I would imagine, that you got the fresh haircut with the wedding on the horizon.
Well, I had to do Real Talk with Keith Smith. I had to get a haircut.
Oh, there we go. There we go. So we're going to wish Mark some early congratulations. Congratulations in a matter of moments. Judah Wickower, things are looking great, which is always refreshing, right? Especially on a Friday. My friend, we can rock and roll when you're ready. Good Friday morning, guys. I'm Jerry Miller, and welcome to Real Talk with Keith Smith. Thank you kindly for joining us. An absolute pleasure to connect with you guys through the I Love CVille Network. Today's show presented by Keller Williams Alliance QB, the benevolent dictator, Quentin Beckham, and Keller Williams Alliance. Undoubtedly a team you can trust in this tumultuous real estate market, guys. I mean, 6% plus interest rates. They've hit 6% and they escalated today for the first time since 2008. I have a feeling that topic is going to come on the show. Before we welcome our esteemed guest, the king of content, Neil Williamson himself, the president of the Free Enterprise Forum, I want to highlight Judah Wickower, who on a Friday is just the North Star of our infrastructure, the director who's become known around the metropolis of Virginia Beach, Norfolk, and cities across the Commonwealth as J-Dubs. J-Dubs, the jack of all wit. Judah Wickower, why don't we go to the studio camera? He liked that. He rarely laughs at my jokes. Today he did. I feel pleased. I feel blessed. Studio camera, Neil Williamson is in the house. My friend, first, how are you?
I am well, and I love walking around Charlottesville seeing people shouting J-Dubs as he walks down the downtown mall.
I love Neil's dry, sarcastic humor so much. I have a feeling today, and I did a kind of a teaser tweet yesterday, we're going to hear maybe elections matter. We may hear seats available. We may hear more housing everywhere for everyone, and we will undoubtedly hear some of the best pop culture references known to mankind. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, your son Mark, a talented offensive lineman, graduated from William & Mary.
Yes.
Got a wedding in 8 days. How's the Williamson family handling the wedding and the stress that comes with weddings and this close a time frame? Well, you know, wedding's right around the corner.
Well, it is true. The wedding is right around the corner, and I am blessed to have a very organized wife that has everything well under control. The couple is doing a great job keeping everything in check, and we're really looking forward to having what will amount to a fun week because we have family coming in. Daughter Jill comes in on Wednesday with her husband, and it'll just be good to have everybody together and to celebrate Mark and Alexis's wedding.
Are you in that state of period where it's just follow what's been told to you, keep your head down, and just get things done? Is that where we're at right now?
I'm not certain that isn't where we are every day.
Neil Williamson, that's for me as well. That's for me as well. You're getting props from Ashley. So she says, congratulations, Neil Williamson and son Mark. Neil is so prepared and ready and looking quite spiffy this morning. Wow, he got the spiffy props today. All right, I'm going to get out of your way. The show and the topic this week, Home Depot purchases much of Fashion Square Mall. It undoubtedly went viral. You knew about this as early as anyone. Where do you want to go on this topic?
Well, I think it's important to recognize, and I'm thrilled that you have the guest you do for this afternoon's program. This is still in a process of becoming. There are still designs to deal with and the like, but it's a done deal. And I think it's important to recognize that one of the things that I've said on this show a number of times, in order to have any plan come to fruition, you need to have a willing property owner. The county put forward a plan called RIO 29 that included intersections going through Fashion Square Mall. That at the time I found to be troubling since they don't own Fashion Square Mall, but they were saying these are things that could be. Don't take it literally. They're lines on a map, it's hard not to take them literally. That being said, those lines aren't going to happen, but the idea of the connectivity between throughout the parcel may happen, because now we have 2 or 3 distinct uses that may end up being 2 or 3 distinct buildings. You may have a standalone Home Depot, and then a standalone mall, and then a standalone Albemarle County service facility. It's a different model than what is currently in RIO 29 plan that calls for a form-based code. I don't think any model that Home Depot has, and they have a few, would match what the form-based code calls for.
Okay, so that's a fresh take right there, and that's where he knows this topic better than anyone. I've been told, for those that are watching and listening to the show, and we have comments coming in, Becky Fitz, we'll get to the comment about what stores are they bringing in here in moments, but I've been told that folks in the area should look at what Home Depot has done in Falls Church, Virginia, with the center that they own up in Falls Church. That may be a model of what's on the horizon. So if you guys want to do some reconnaissance, Falls Church, Virginia, and look at what Home Depot, the owner of that center, is doing up there. Did this shock you or surprise you? I mean, the person that, and I'll catch some grief here, the person who undoubtedly has been then leading the charge of, hey, UVA, Fashion Square Mall, has been me. It seemed like a no-brainer. They did not become the buyer. We know Home Depot is. Now they're going to be a landlord and a developer. Did it surprise you that a big box store like this made this purchase?
Well, I was tickled by a recent post that said, well, orange was the right color for that particular parcel, but it just wasn't UVA orange.
Was that yours?
No, it wasn't.
It was somebody else?
It was someone else's. And the reality is Home Depot has a huge number of different models. The model in Falls Church, the one I'm thinking of, it includes a frontage of structured parking, which is very unusual for a building, home improvement store. It is due to a lack of parking. I don't think that model fits here, because if there's one thing Fashion Square Mall has, it's parking.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that they need structured parking on that site, although it would reduce impervious surface. Perhaps if they change the other to less impervious surface. I think that it surprised me a little bit. Home Depot has been very interested in this market for a long time. I will say, as I quoted in a blog post about 3 years ago, I needed to refinish my wood floors, and I went over the mountain to the Home Depot, had to drive past an Olive Garden in Harrisonburg, and because the others don't rent the floor buffers, and I didn't need to buy one, and so I rented it, and I drove back, and all the way I was thinking, why aren't these brands here in Charlottesville and Albemarle? And the easy answer is, sometimes some of them have tried, some of them have gotten to the pre-application process and pulled back. Cracker Barrel did that, they pulled back from that. You may or may not remember that where now a bank and oil change are located in front of Buffalo Wild Wings, at one point was going to be a Sonic. They pulled back. And others have seen the regulations and the manner in which Albemarle puts forth those regulations, and found those challenges to be more expensive than the value they were getting. The question is the juice worth the squeeze?
John Blair, we love you, JB. That was a heck of a bench press. We saw you do this morning on Twitter. He's hitting new records, John Blair, on the bench, Neil Williamson.
That's fabulous. There is nothing better than starting the day with a good workout.
Well said, well said. So why don't we highlight the challenges with signage when it's come to some of these brands in Albemarle County?
Sure. Let's, rather than pick one out that might be in process, we can talk about one that came through, Applebee's. Applebee's features awnings. Those awnings have no writing on them. There was a long discussion at the ARB about whether or not those awnings were signage. And in the end, they said, well, it could be somebody else could come in there, and they are in the Applebee's location closest to my office, and change the awnings, and it wouldn't be the same meaning. So I think that I know that they measure the signage very carefully, how much advertising signage you have, including if you have signs in your windows like grocery stores do. That counts against your signage. and the number of days you can have temporary signage up is also limited by county code. That being said, some brands have huge brand footprints. I remember back before Jerry even got to Charlottesville, there was Toys R Us that wanted to put a Jeffrey on the top of their store near Hillsdale Drive.
That's the Giraffe.
That's the Giraffe, and it was denied by the ARB, as was the Plug for the Circuit City building that now is in Albemarle Square. It was in Albemarle Square. There are these are things that Albemarle has done to say we're unique. We don't recognize your logo as being as important, and you will have to fight with us to get your logos, especially if your logo contains a red known as PMS 186, because that's like the evil red that no one seems to like.
Neil Williamson is dropping knowledge right now. That is fresh takes, not mentioned in any media outlets so far. Becky Fritz is asking some of the businesses that are coming to the mall currently, and this is directly from General Manager Athena Emons, who's going to join us on the I Love CVille show at 12:30. They have, and I'm going to read her quote directly. She texted me this. In the past several months, we have or will be opening just over 31,000 square feet of new retail, including Bintastic, Elite Empire, Snaptrap, and Nails Next Door. She also said there will be an additional 5 new tenants announced before the holidays. I spoke to some of the tenants. The tenants were very, 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 very straightforward with me. They said they've been working with Albemarle County since May to get their businesses open and are still in purgatory when it comes to opening their businesses. A lot of these are literally mom and pops, like I'd say just about all of them. And fortunately, Athena and her team at JLL has worked with them with their lease to try to limit overhead since this process is taking so long. She also indicated that previous managers would not have been so flexible or generous. They would have said to these tenants, you're paying full rent, you sign the lease, you give us the full nut every single month. But the majority of them, Neil, have filed permitting. It's the CO since May.
Certificate of occupancy.
Certificate of occupancy, and still it's in limbo.
Right now, building permits are taking in Albemarle County. A simple building permit, this isn't a rezoning or a site plan, a simple building permit is taking between 60 and 120 days. The biggest problem with that for builders is there's no consistency. So, as horrible as it is, if you've planned for 120 days and it comes in 60, well, your client wants you to start building. Well, wait a minute, I planned for 120. That's 2 more months of time that I was planning to have my crews doing other things. In defense of other management, I would suggest that this is the market at work. This is Smith's invisible hand. There was capacity. In order to reduce capacity, they reduced rents, created more flexibility, and created opportunities for businesses to operate. Many businesses that could have been standalone internet-only businesses now have a bricks and mortar presence for a short term perhaps, but I mean that is the kind of ingenuity that you need to do in property management today as you're fighting against Amazon and the others who, you're sitting right here and you could be shopping.
That's right. Adam Smith just got a reference right there with the invisible hand of economics right there. I love what Neil Williamson brings to the table here. So you got a JCPenney that is now an Albemarle County optimized public service center. It's an opportunity for what? Mechanical work, storage of Albemarle County vehicles, just kind of like this. How would you characterize it?
I would characterize it as a more than a city yard.
Okay.
Which a city yard would be just a place where you park vehicles.
Which is in Star Hill for Charlottesville City.
Star Hill but also a maintenance facility.
Uh-huh.
They will have maintenance availability outside of the elements, and this is something they've needed to do for some time. When it was first announced, I was not as thrilled as some, But the fact that they're leasing rather than purchasing, if you purchase, you then take that property off the tax rolls. If you lease, then the taxpayers pay taxes, which I guess is kind of weird too, on the land because your taxes are part of your rent. As anyone who is a renter knows, taxes impact you.
Undoubtedly.
It is an absolute fact. Don't say, well, I don't pay property taxes because I rent. No, you pay property taxes. It's embedded in your rent.
Right. It's either a triple net lease or the landlord's going to pass those taxes down to the tenant downstream in the form of a rent increase. That's how it happens, folks. So you got the JCPenney, that's this city yard on steroids for Albemarle County. You got the Belk's Woman's Store, that's to be determined. You got Home Depot and the rest of Fashion Square Mall, that's to be determined. You got a massive asphalt parking lot there as well. You got a number of new tenants, as the general manager explained, 31,000 square feet of new retail coming. So there's a lot of limbo happening here. I got a very straightforward question for you. Were you at all disappointed that this didn't turn into housing?
No.
No?
I really wasn't. It's not as well situated for housing. And was I disappointed that it didn't turn into mixed use? Probably.
Okay.
The mixed use option would work. The challenge with mixed use, and this goes back 20 odd years now, about 20 years, there was when the new Lowe's came in south of town, the then chair of the Thomas Jefferson Partnership, or Thomas Jefferson Planning District, said, I was really disappointed there weren't apartments above the Lowe's. And it was explained to me, and again, I don't know these things, it had to be explained to me, there is no bank in the world that would insure a building that had residences above it as a build from the ground up. Because you might do that if it was already existing and adaptive reuse, but built from the ground up, every problem that apartment has above, plumbing leaks, et cetera, will downfall into your store. And that mixed use at the time was very difficult to insure and finance. So I understand those realities. I would still love to see a portion of this parcel become additional housing. You know, on the periphery, I could really see, this is really in an area where services are well delivered. And you have some affordable housing right there on the back with Mallside. So I could see some townhouses, not dissimilar to what we have at Glenwood Station there, maybe on the front side or on the north side of that going in. I also see, you know, I wrote a piece in 2019 about Charming Charlie, which was a store that was closing in Fashion Square Mall. And people were upset about losing Charming Charlie, which I've never been to. But Charming Charlie is a story of creative destruction. We are always as Americans, generally speaking, in this bout of becoming and growing and changing. Change is hard. Change requires us to accept that we do not know, as opposed to that we know. That's a big leap.
That's a big leap. Free Enterprise Forum for that content. Check it out and support the man, please. Free Enterprise Forum. More comments coming in. I promise I will get to these in a matter of moments. I have some questions myself for Neil Williamson. Lauren Wade, we'll get to that in a matter of moments. Kevin, we'll get to yours in a matter of moments as well. We'll talk interest rates, which are clearly all over the feed right now. Home Depot and from your take, Albemarle County, what kind of timeline do you think we're looking at here? And I know you don't have a crystal ball. There is a prop for one sitting literally behind you. Can't see into the future. I would imagine this is a considerable time away.
Not as long as some projects.
Okay.
Reason being, I believe they have all the zoning they need.
Okay.
So if you have a parcel that is zoned appropriately for commercial, it doesn't matter that it's not selling suits, it's selling sledgehammers. It is still commercial activity. So that piece is done, the zoning piece. That takes forever and a day. That can be up to 10 years in some cases, but most cases it's between 1 and 3. You still have to go through architecting, designing the building, getting that through the architectural review board, which takes not forever anymore. But it does take some time. And then you have to get your building permits, which we've discussed is a long time for just a simple building permit. This will require a site plan, and a building permit, and that requires a fair amount of staff time, as well as all your permitting and the actual construction time. So I would say that I'd be very surprised if we saw anything within 24 months, but perhaps your guest this afternoon would have a better gauge at that.
As a free market guy, what do you make of the Home Depot directly across from the Lowe's? You love it, don't you?
I do.
Me too.
As many of you know, I grew up in the Northern Virginia area, and there was you'll appreciate this from an advertising standpoint, Harry the Homeowner.
Okay.
Harry the Homeowner was the mascot of the Hechinger Company. Hechinger was a small regional hardware store, and it owned the DC market. When Home Depot and Lowe's came in, there was actually an article in the Washington Business Journal, and an executive at Hechinger just said, "We've been charging too much for too long for our products," because they could. Competition is good.
Well said. Directly across the street from each other, and I think anyone who's been to that Lowe's, Judah's given the nod as well. If anyone's been to that Lowe's on 29, it can be a cluster, man, and it's not always the best from a help standpoint. So having a competitor directly across the street, I think is going to raise everyone's game and make everyone offer better service, better price points to us, the customers. The impact of this project on Albemarle County as a jurisdiction. Anywhere you want to go with that one?
Well, sure. This actually dovetails back to your housing question. By this not being in housing, the way that the current tax regime is in Albemarle County and most of the United States, housing does not pay for itself, but commercial activity exceeds paying for itself. They pay the freight, plus you get 1% of the sales tax returned to you. Now, if you have X number of people buying 2x4s and you have one store to buy 2x4s, do you then have 0.5 people buying 2x4s in each one, or do you increase the number of people buying 2x4s?
That's a great question.
And so do you cannibalize the tax base, or do you expand it? My guess is there's an expansion, but I also know some folks that live specifically west of town that make no bones about going over the mountain to John Blair Land to do all of their home improvement shopping because they get better pricing and like to go over the mountain.
Judah's giving the nod. Oh, Judah wants to slide in the mic over and wants to go on a 3-shot. Look at that. Judah Wickhauer, jump in here.
So, two particular sets of businesses that I remember in Savannah, Georgia, were the movie theaters and the Lowe's and Home Depot, and both of them were right next to each other. So you had one theater with a giant parking lot right next to another theater with a giant parking lot, both always full. Lowe's and Home Depot was exactly the same. They were literally right next to each other, parking lots right next to each other, and both of the lots were always full. People went to whichever one they wanted, and I don't think any of those businesses were having any problems.
Good take right there from Judah Wickhauer. Becky Fitz has this question. Becky, thank you for watching the show. Neil, why is Albemarle County so strict on signage for businesses?
That's a great question, Becky. It actually draws back to 1976. When Jerry was just a mere twinkle in the eye.
I wasn't even born yet then.
I was 10 years old, but the Queen came to visit, and rest her soul, the Queen came to visit, and Albemarle all of a sudden put up huge regulations about billboards, especially on US 29, because, wait, the Queen's driving by. We can't have billboards that say, "Hey, Pepe, south of the border." The idea behind it was to control the environment and make it Albemarle-like rather than Anytown, USA. So the Architectural Review Board was created somewhere around 81. And I'm probably the only person who has read all of the minutes of the Architectural Review Board from its beginning. And if you read that first meeting, halfway through the first meeting, there's a notation that the recording secretary said, "Mr. Lindstrom instructed me to turn off the recording at this point." 33 minutes later, it comes back and says, "Mr. Lindstrom told me to start recording again."
Oh my goodness.
And that's in a report that you'll see under the reports tab called ARB, The Eye of the Beholder at freeenterpriseforum.org. But
What happened in those 33 minutes?
it was a fundamental question about logos, the importance of logos, and free speech. And I don't know what happened in those 33. I was a freshman in high school. I wasn't there, but that did happen, and it's documented in that report, ARB Eye of the Beholder.
Oh my goodness. Free Enterprise Forum, guys, for that knowledge right there. This question's coming from Stephen. Would you characterize Albemarle County as pro-business, and how does it compare to the city of Charlottesville with facilitating new business to come to the county or the city? That's a great question.
That is a great question, and I'm remiss if I don't mention the Rodney Dangerfield movie, Back to School. In that movie, Rodney Dangerfield sold big and tall men's clothes. And his point was, if you want to look skinny, have fat friends. So when you stand Albemarle County's building permit approvals up against Charlottesville, Albemarle looks pretty good. Charlottesville is currently trying to rework their entire neighborhood development services. They are in a mess right now. I firmly believe that the top of the chain is working diligently to fix the problems, but they're taking longer. That being said, would I consider Albemarle business friendly? Depends on the business. Depends on who you know. Depends on how you go about it. I have an unbelievable amount of respect for Roger Johnson, who's the economic development director.
He's awesome.
He's awesome.
I'll tag him.
He is awesome, but he is also one of the people that understands Albemarle and how Albemarle does things. And so he needed, when he came in, and there was someone there before that was a little more of a bull than China shop, that said, you need economic development and you should smarten up and realize you need it. And instead, Roger's come forward with, okay, what would economic development that you would approve look like? Should we keep the jobs that we have here by giving somebody a place to expand or ability to expand? The idea of, well, where will your children work? How about the career ladder jobs? Where are those jobs? These are really deeper questions than, do you want to have a Sonic at the end of North 29?
Well said. You're getting a question, more of a comment for Paul MacArthur, who's watching the program. Paul, we love when you watch the show of Avenue, and he said Home Depot and Lowe's, when it's all said and done, offer very different services. And this will be very, very evident when they're next to each other on 29.
I couldn't agree more. The buffing story being one, the tool buffing story that I had to go over the mountain in order to get it, because that's a service that Home Depot offers that Lowe's does not.
Jamie Turner, welcome to the program, the mayor of Gordonsville, repping the pep and Culpeper. Multiple folks are loving the dad jokes and the pop culture references right now. This question is a very intriguing one. What could make both Albemarle County and the city of Charlottesville more facilitators or better facilitators of business? We all know we need incremental tax revenue, as Jerry likes to put it. That's Grayson, who is watching in Belmont. Grayson, we love when you watch the show.
Thank you, Grayson. That's a great question. Right now, Albemarle County is going through the beginnings of its comprehensive plan they've labeled AC 44. Charlottesville is going through a zoning rewrite. There have been a number of announcements about economic development recently. We may touch on some of those across the state. My question every time I read an economic development success is, where would we put that here? Where would that go? And the answer is, there are no spots ready to go. And the other answer is, well, we don't have enough land zoned light industrial, and that land that we have zoned light industrial, many of them are converting to housing because the costs associated with locating here are too high. How do we fix that? And what type of investment could we make to make that happen? And what is it we want to be? I mean, do we want to be sitting in gated communities as professors of the university and have people driving 30 miles in every day to service our economy? Or do we want to have a diversified economy and diversification of housing across our entire community?
Well, and this is like, I want the diversification of housing, and I would like the prioritization on economic development because it alleviates the burden on rooftops and personal property. And I don't have the ties to this community like you do. I've been here 22 years, came here as the first year at the University of Virginia, and all I've seen is the taxes on housing and personal property become more difficult to digest, to the point where, like, inner circle friends of mine, 4-year degrees from UVA, master's degrees from UVA, are legitimately being priced out of Charlottesville and Albemarle County, to the point where 3 families, inner circle friends of mine, have moved to Waynesboro because of the price points when it comes to housing, and they just say, hey, we don't mind the commute as much, and we also have this opportunity to work in this hybrid setting. And that demoralizes me because we don't get to see them as much, and these are people that certainly would love to live in the area. So I think the economic development should be prioritized, but am I wrong in seeing that's not always the case for everyone in leadership?
I think you're right and wrong at the same time, as Keith would say. Yes and maybe no.
Maybe yes, maybe no yes.
It's a good exercise to review other localities and how they approach opportunities, be they economic development opportunities, be they housing opportunities, and how long it takes them to get through the process. On the other side of the mountain, you do see a faster track. In Greene County, you see things move, not rocket speed, but they move much quicker than they do in Albemarle and Charlottesville. Louisa has gotten a little bit slower in the last 2 years, but they are embracing the idea of increased economic development. What they're embracing, as Waynesboro and others are, is, yeah, come and live here. Come on, we got cool stuff. and we're gonna, when you get the rooftops, we'll get the other stuff. And yeah, we'll let an Olive Garden come in, sure. We'll let the Cracker Barrel have their porch, it's fine. We don't have quite the hang-up some other people do.
This, Alan Polson, welcome to the program. You got a lot of folks watching here. Becky, you're opening up Becky's eyes to this. She has a very good question. How often, Neil, are the signage restrictions reviewed and updated?
Trying to recall, we did have a review within the last 8 years. It was a fairly decent sized review, and those signage requirements are based upon square footage as well as road frontage for the calculation, and it's probably a higher calculation than this liberal arts major can do. And before I get branded as someone who has been born and bred here, I only have a few more years on Jerry because I moved here. I'm a newbie. I moved here in '99.
Okay, so right about the same time. Me, as a first year, probably not nearly as in tune with things as you, the professional in 1999 who came here. Paul MacArthur follows up his comment by saying Lowe's targets the homeowners and those with a decorating mindset, while Home Depot is targeting contractors and more of a construction mindset. So maybe what Paul's alluding to, and Paul, I don't want to speak for you, we've dubbed him the king of the South Side. Paul, we love when you interact with the show. You genuinely make the shows better, man. Maybe what he's alluding to is this will drive tax revenue because it's a different customer base. Lowe's more the layman, the family customer, moms and dads. I actually found out yesterday you can't say moms and dads anymore. The preferred nomenclature is parents now. Which is...
things I learned.
Yeah. So it's now parents is the preferred nomenclature. Where Home Depot is now is more targeted for contractors. So that could be to your point that maybe the base is not cannibalized because it's two different customer verticals.
Right, but if you're after, again, same point, just different players. You have Better Living, you have Cardinal Home Supply. Those are dealing directly with pros.
That's a good point.
And and they will work with homeowners, but their real market is the pros. So the question still stands, as you add a new participant in the market, do you divide the market or do you expand the market?
That's a great point. Very well said. Kevin Yancey, the king of Waynesboro, said, didn't Albemarle County basically outlaw neon signs?
Neon has been, in practice, neon has pretty much outlawed itself. One of the challenges, and they are going to be reviewing this, I believe, next year, one of the challenges with light technology is that it moves so swiftly.
What's that mean?
Well, for instance, it used to be measured in foot candles. That sounds like a really expensive term, foot candles. Well, now it's measured in lumens.
You're talking innovation here.
Innovation and innovation in measurement. In innovation, I mean, you can have a cathode ray tube producing X number of foot candles, or you can have an LED producing lumens. And how it's measured and how it's focused, which is more important than how it's measured, is how it's focused. The light spillage is sometimes an issue, and I go back to this term, gosh, too many acronyms, CPTED, which is preparing places to be safe.
Okay.
And the idea is, if there's a little light spillage from my parking lot onto the sidewalk, is it a bad thing? If there's a lot of light spillage into the driver's eyes, I think that is a bad thing. But a little light spillage onto the sidewalk might be a safety enhancement.
Very well said. We're going to get to the chatter on the interest rates. Multiple folks are talking about the interest rates. In fact, Kevin just shared on the feed, which is a terrifying proposition. Kevin, we love when you interact with the show. Friend of his with not great credit just locked in a 30-year mortgage at a 15% interest rate. And a 15%. You want to touch that?
I will just say that I am old enough that my sister's first townhouse that she bought was at 18.
Yeah.
And 3 years or 4 years later, she refinanced, and then 4 years later, she moved. These are the times we're in. And I am not, you have lots of financial professionals who watch this program, that appear on this program. I just know what personal experiences are, and I believe interest rates impact markets. The availability of money impacts everything. The red numbers on the TV screen today impact everything, and where money goes. All of those things are intertwined. That being said, this is not the end of the world. This is the world we're in today. Tomorrow's world will likely be different.
Well said. Well said. He's talking red on the screen. The markets guys are very poised to be down for a fourth week and out of the last 5 weeks. And there is undoubtedly volatility and concern on Wall Street. We'll get to that perhaps. Why don't you put a bow around and dot the I's and cross the T's on Home Depot? Anything else you want to get out there? Zoning, government, finance, economic development, the future. Multiple folks are talking about this asphalt parking lot and how that could have been utilized for so many other different things. We're very empathetic to that. But this is just the nature of the free enterprise.
Nothing is written in stone, and the property owner, whether you like them or don't like them, has rights. And their rights include up to the zoning. That being said, I fully expect if you're looking at a teardown situation, you're probably looking at a reimagination of the site. And that may include, for instance, does anybody like Chick-fil-A?
Love Chick-fil-A.
So for the longest time, you could only get it in the mall. And then Lowe's up on the hill did a mathematical calculation and realized they had way too much parking, much more than the ordinance required. And they were able to sell off that parcel and the parking and open and have a Chick-fil-A up there open. That changed the dynamic and the traffic pattern up there dramatically. And I do have a very strong admiration for Chick-fil-A drive-thru.
Oh, they're amazing.
It is.
How do they have 15-year-olds standing outside inhaling exhaust fumes, no matter the weather, expediting orders? It's amazing.
My pleasure.
Right? For our pleasure. I
Right.
mean, it's absolutely amazing. In fact, we've joked on the show, and I'll throw it back to you. The Chick-fil-A infrastructure should have been the ones issuing the COVID shots.
I will just say that there is a lot to be learned from private industry that does their private industry well.
Well said. Neil Williamson dropping knowledge here. This is a great question here. Stacey, we love when you watch the show. Can you please ask Mr. Williamson if the city of Charlottesville should be very concerned that Albemarle County is going to continue taking tax base away from the city? You can go a lot of ways there. You got the revenue sharing agreement. You can go in that direction. There's a lot of possibilities. I'm very curious of what you have to say on this.
I believe that the city of Charlottesville is a highly attractive location for some businesses. And I believe the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County work together well on economic development. The assets that Albemarle County has are different than the assets that the city have, and thus I believe their economic development targets are different. Over the years, they've traded various folks, one in one locality moved to the other and vice versa, and there will always be that. But as a region, we all survive by economic vitality being positive for all.
Well said. Economic targets are different. What exactly does that mean?
I would suggest that VMV Brands does better in a city urban environment than it would do out at the research park.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Different base of customers, different mindset of customers and how they go about life.
So location matters.
Yeah.
So there are many businesses like VMB Brands that want to be in that urban center. And there are other businesses that are much more accustomed to wet labs and being sequestered on a corporate campus that would fit better at the research park or another location, Woolen Mills, for instance.
Spencer says, why are there not light industrial, as he said it, or warehouse spaces available to so many businesses in the area that need it in Albemarle?
Why is because they've been eaten up by other income-producing projects, including housing, and not replaced. Why? Because our development area was effectively designed in 1971, before Jerry was even a glint in the eye. But in 1971, the original lines were drawn. They were codified in 1979, 1980 with the great downzoning of the rural area, and they have not significantly changed. They've changed a little bit, but have not significantly changed since. It's time for the community to recognize the need to be more than less. Right now, it's less than 5% of the land mass in Albemarle County. If you do that, and you have the environmental concerns that you have of stream buffers, steep slopes, et cetera, requiring 15% open space, all reasonable, understandable things you want to have, you're going to run out of land. And the report, the AC44 internal report, shows that. The capacity analysis shows that. Now, the capacity analysis shows that there is enough industrial land. Well, why is that? Because the demand for industrial land in Albemarle County has been so suppressed for so long because it hasn't been available. If you all of a sudden had facilities available for startups, I firmly believe you would see Albemarle County grow in startups.
I completely agree with that. Carol Thorpe watching the program, the queen of Jack Jewett. Carol,
Hi, Carol.
We love when you watch the show. She says, it alarms me that many who champion affordable housing in Albemarle and Charlottesville do not also champion economic development, which will create the kinds of upward mobile jobs that will support the requirements and challenges of successful long-term home ownership. Without the economic development, the sandwich makers and the shelf stockers, how long can houses stay affordable once we get the economically margin into them? She's basically saying, if we have affordable housing in Charlottesville City or in Albemarle County, but we don't have the jobs for the folks that need the affordable housing, how long could they live in the affordable housing we create for them? That's a great comment.
Right, the idea of creating a permanent underclass and providing no ladder to get out.
Right. Juan Sarmiento watching the program. He is one of the best mechanics we know. He services the fleet of CAT. We've dubbed him the king of transportation, Juan Sarmiento. Welcome to the program, my friend. A lot of comments coming in. The interest rate comment is all over the feed right now. We're now over 6% on a 30 fix with good credit. That's with good credit. We have a case study put in the feed, a neighbor friend of Kevin's. She did not have good credit. 30-year fixed at a 15% interest rate. I'll start open-ended for you. This is going to go higher. PAL on the 20th, the expectation is either 3/4 of a basis point increase or a full point increase. That's in 4 days. He's going to make that announcement. The expectation is another rate hike in October. That could be half a basis point in October. And now, because the inflation number came in hot earlier this week, the chatter is potentially one in November as well. Open-ended question, then I'll take a deep dive for you. What do you make of this?
I look back at the first part of what was likely going to be a one term of the Reagan administration. And I believe it's Paul Volcker.
That's right.
Was the Fed chair. And he was a maverick and raised interest rates right and left. And as he did it, people said Reagan will never be reelected, and we're all going to die with these interest rates. And the folks in the Reagan administration smiled and said, hang on, wait, there's more. And in the end, supply-side economics, which was David Stockman, was the director of budget, forced additional dollars into government programs that had been mothballed previously and generated significant new revenues, spinning the economy forward. And he was reelected by the biggest landslide in history in 1984. So I think it's important to recognize that this isn't the same time, but the past is important. History is important to remember how things looked pretty bleak. I mean, 18, 21% on a mortgage?
Yeah.
Now, the other part of this
That's
is
credit card rates.
These young people like Whitgour and Miller here, they haven't lived through 6% interest rates. It's a new thing.
My first place was 6 1/8.
Okay, so it's just, you were just there. You were
Villas at Southern Ridge.
Right,
Yeah,
but it
2006.
was 2006.
Yeah.
So your first place was 6%. So now we are seeing new ground if we're over 6%.
Yeah.
And that's scary.
That's scary.
And I mean, my daughter, when we purchased something not so long ago, she couldn't believe we paid over 2% in interest. Well, what are you basing that on? Well, we bought something about 4 years ago or 4 months ago, and we were able to. That's not now. And we've seen all of this before. That's the first line in Peter Pan. All of this has happened before.
His daughter, living in the thriving metropolis of Boston, on the line, the train line, if memory serves correctly, her better half has to take the train a number of stops. So they purchased something right at the end of the line, and Neil very much enjoys staying there with his beautiful daughter and son-in-law. Is that accurate?
It is accurate, and I have what they call the Charlie card.
I knew the Charlie card was
in my wallet. I'm ready to use it at any time.
I love this guy so much. Vanessa Parkhill, welcome to the program, the Queen of Earlysville. My friend, throw this to you. Interest rates that are, guys, it would not shock me if we hit 7% plus in the next 30 days. Especially with Powell doing this 3/4 of a basis point increase in 4 days and another one coming in October. High interest rates and affordable housing seem to be oxymorons.
They do, but they also create opportunities. When you have high interest rates and you can work with nonprofits to buy down a loan, to perhaps assist with down payment, but also you could buy down the rate for a period of time. Those are opportunities that don't exist in a low interest rate market. That is a different product that isn't necessary at all times, but at this time it can help first-time home buyers that qualify for such help.
Stephanie Fick, welcome to the broadcast. More questions coming in here. How does that work? You would suggest that someone that's maybe looking to buy a house, struggling to make the payments, or concerned about getting the mortgage, partner with the nonprofit to buy the points down? Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And sometimes it's a short-term buy down and requires a refinance. It's a roll of the dice. Where are we going to be 5 years from now? But if it's what gets you into that home and makes that home affordable at the proper percentage of income, it is probably a good bet to take.
Sally Smith watching the program, and she says, where would the affordable housing even go in the city of Charlottesville?
That's a great question. I know that Keith Smith has mentioned what has gone on Nassau Street.
Yeah, with the land trust.
With the land trust. I believe that there are opportunities, more opportunities in Albemarle than Charlottesville, only because Albemarle is larger.
Right.
Charlottesville is 10.2 square miles. And what we're seeing with the new zoning ordinance is likely an inclusionary zoning requirement built in to the ordinance. That's different than the way we've been dealing with inclusionary zoning before. Inclusionary zoning before has been dealt with on a rezoning basis. So what that meant is if you wanted to upzone you were required to give a certain number of, and demanded that they're affordable for a period of time. In this case, it doesn't matter if you're rezoning or you're doing it by right. Everyone will have a level playing field. And if you want to put in 10 apartments, one of those will have to be affordable for a period of time. That's the concept of inclusionary zoning under an ordinance.
Kevin Yancey, talk to me about the McIntyre Park comment. I'm up to go down the road of McIntyre Park, but give me a little more ammunition so I can throw to Neil with McIntyre Park. The follow-up question is from Sally that affordable housing seems to be a ruse around here. We've been looking for housing for almost 2 years. With the rates going up, we've pretty much given up, and we've decided that it's either Waynesboro or we're going to move somewhere else to live. We empathize and sympathize with Sally in that comment, Neil.
I couldn't agree with Sally more. The challenge for finding affordable housing, or housing that is affordable to general population, is huge. That being said, Waynesboro and other are options. I remember in the 1980s, when a locality in Northern Virginia market indicated they were concerned, someone was concerned that they weren't paying their public servants enough to actually buy housing. And a member of that board of supervisors said, well, trailers are housing and we need to consider that as part of the housing solution. Well, the question is, what are we defining as housing? Is it a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom standalone house? Is it an apartment? Is it, and what works for you? Most people, housing decisions are not philosophical decisions, they're family decisions. You've got a baby on the way. You have a need for more space. You downsizing. All of those decisions are personal decisions. And they're impacted by macro decisions of what the economy is today and how many houses are available and how many units are available and what's acceptable to you. I will tell you, I haven't lived in an apartment since my college days. I've lived in a shared house, but I haven't lived in an apartment since my college days, and I don't want to go back.
Right. Juan Sarmiento says, that's why I live in Louisa County, affordable housing. Then he commutes to Charlottesville City, where he's one of the top technicians for the Charlottesville-Albemarle Transit Fleet. We have monikered him the king of transportation. Brittany Gray watching the program, the fantastic realtor, Brittany Gray. She says, we're working on affordable housing right now, Neil, in Fluvanna County.
And when you work on affordable housing, and Keith likes to say housing affordability, there are a couple of ways to work on that. And you can work on that with projects, you can work on that with policies, you can work on that by working with the laws of supply and demand. And I know of several large projects going on in Louisa County and some that are on the books, perhaps, in Fluvanna. They may not have come to fruition yet, that will increase the supply. And when you increase the supply, you increase governmental demands as well. And that needs to be recognized that, yes, when you build more housing, you get more people. And when you build more housing, it lowers the cost of housing.
Lauren watching the program, great interview. Can you get Neil's take on the transportation issues the schools are facing?
Sure. Well, the schools, I was horrified when I heard that Charlottesville City had 6, count them, 6 bus drivers. And this is not unique. In fact, Louisa County is unique in that they have a full bullet of bus drivers. This is something going around the state, going around the nation. And it is a concern, a crisis. Getting a CDL license, there's a couple of different things that can be done. One thing that has been considered in Charlottesville and was discussed early on, do we have to have the big bus? What if we had a fleet of smaller vehicles? Would we get enough drivers to drive the smaller vehicles? Now that means you need to have more drivers, but you don't have to have a CDL, a commercial driver's license, in order to do it. That being said, I think that that's part of the solution. There was some discussion yesterday about privatization. I have no problem with privatization. I have a problem with the schools privatizing some. If you can't provide for all, provide for none. I really do have that concern. And it is because what it does is it creates two classes of citizens.
Yep.
And public education is supposed to be a meritocracy that's open to all. And anything that creates division in that creates a problem for me.
I give him props for that. Props for Neil. After yesterday's show, I got feedback from 2 neighborhoods who listened to the show, and they're going to move forward with it's the parents. They're not even going to wait for the schools. The parents are going to contract out the service themselves. At least they said they would. Because there was some liability issues if the schools did the joint venture with private business. I'm not sure public can do it in that scenario, but the parents can hire a private transportation service
Absolutely.
to get their kids to school.
They can, and there is nothing, for viewers to know, there is nothing that I'm aware of in state code that mandates the locality provide transportation to the schools. I know that's sacrilege, but that is my understanding.
Okay, so I'm learning here. Wow. So nothing in state code that you know of, and you're very well read here, you're the king of content, that would say the public schools have to get the kids to
the
school on a school bus.
I'm not aware of anything that says that.
Wow, that's a frightening proposition.
It's
Because
reality.
if the schools don't get the kids to school on a school bus, and granted that's not really happening in a very optimized scenario right now, what happens to the 2-parent working family?
Right. Well, it changes the dynamic.
Yeah.
And what you're talking now about these 2 neighborhoods, which is really just glorified carpooling.
Yeah, that's what it is.
It's glorified
carpooling.
carpooling.
Right.
And
Except there's a third party involved.
there's a third party involved.
And money.
And well, money. So you're hiring a driver.
Yeah, it's what Kelly Jackson called yesterday Uber for kids.
Yeah. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And the opportunity will be there. And that may reduce the pressure on that, which is your point, on the other venues of transportation. But I'm much more worried about the single mom who's trying to make it work.
Me too.
And doesn't have an extra $100 a month to give her kid a Wi-Fi equipped bus to drive to school.
That's fair. That's a very good point right there. Kevin says, both of you guys, Jerry and Neil, without a CDL, the most you can have is 14 kids on a bus, 15 total because you have to include the driver.
Great point. Thank you
Yeah.
for that information.
And he has a CDL, Kevin, and that's what he does professionally, transportation. He's a driver for a living. He's also encouraged us. Kevin, you're well-read, man. Give us the intel and the insight here. He says, please further research the state requirements to carry students. We're open-minded. We're willing to learn here on the fly, offer some intel. He says there's multiple state requirements. Give us clear...
That would be great. That would
Yeah.
be news to me, which is fine. This is not my area of expertise.
We're 100% open ears and want to learn on the show. The viewers and listeners are sophisticated and smart here. Give us more knowledge on what you're alluding to, and I'm happy to read it live on air. Wow. The state code is being shared on the feed here.
Good.
Of on the show, so I can read it. The link is here. It shall be unlawful for any person, whether licensed or not, who is under the age of 18 to drive. Okay. Show me the exact line here. I'm doing this on the fly. It's so difficult to do this on the fly.
You mean reading code on the fly?
Reading
is
code on the
difficult?
fly while hosting a talk show. Can someone take the actual language from the state code? Brittany, will you take the language from the state code of the link that applies to this and paste it in the feed? Because it's difficult for me to do. Juan, who has a CDL, says you still need the passenger certification in order to transport the students. And the passenger certification is very similar with time consumption to the CDL.
Gotcha. Again, these are areas that I do not have expertise. I was simply responding to the questions that came up in yesterday's show,
Right.
where I thought that there was a unintentional discrimination that was going to happen if the schools were involved in that process and were not
Financial discrimination.
and not able. If the schools were supplying it and not able to supply it to all, that was a problem.
Right.
If the parents want to put their money together,
That's free enterprise.
That's free enterprise. Everybody, go rock on.
Yeah.
I'm all for it. There are bus company. As somebody who's going to be doing some transportation stuff over the wedding, there's a bus company out there that buys used school buses and carts wedding parties with them.
Yeah. Are you alluding to Seville Hop-On Tours?
Seville Hop-On Tours is a much better bus than the school buses.
Okay, on there. We have multiple viewers and listeners picking through the state code to help us with this show.
I'm so appreciative.
I love this. More, please keep this coming. We're literally learning on the fly here. I'm not able to read through the state code while hosting the show here. Oh my God, the code is here. 46.2-917. Operation of yellow motor vehicles of certain seating capacity on state highways prohibited, exceptions, penalty. It shall be unlawful for any motor vehicle license in Virginia having a seating capacity of more than 15 persons to be operated on the highways of the Commonwealth if it is yellow, unless it is used in transporting students who attend public, private, or religious schools, or used in transporting the elderly or mentally or physically handicapped versions.
Right.
This supports what Kevin said. How about, what specifically are we looking for?
What specifically we're looking for is anything that requires the jurisdiction to provide transportation to and from school. That I've not known. If it's there, I will learn. I'm happy to learn.
Yeah.
Because if it was there, I have this feeling there would be questions about how far you could walk, which would bring up the Charlottesville walking bus, which is probably the worst branding I've ever heard. But the idea behind, I mean, I walked to school uphill both ways, 3/4 of a mile. But it was, that was what we did.
The Charlottesville walking bus is the moniker given to what's going on in Charlottesville City as groups of parents are helping shepherd students from neighborhood, air quotes, bus stops, and then they walk them, they shepherd them to the schools.
Yes.
And I agree the Charlottesville walking bus is a terrible brand. We're not knocking the effort.
No.
We're just knocking the moniker.
Right.
On the show. And I will give Dr. Gurley props, the superintendent of Charlottesville City Schools, who legitimately is like part of the gaggle of students and parents walking from the neighborhoods to the schools. I saw him do it with Venable. I mean, he's on the front lines.
And he's doing it when the cameras aren't there.
Right, exactly right. That's very well said. Thank you for emphasizing that right there. Kevin says what the private owner wants to wade through to carry the students is completely different, which is supporting our argument here.
Right.
Because the private owner is the free enterprise. Wow, this is blowing up right here, Neil. Keep the code conversation coming. We do want to highlight a couple of other points here. We can get back on topic on this because this hits close to home. It's parents and kids.
It is, and it is amazing the import that those school buses, and as Kelly Jackson was saying yesterday, was the activity buses, after school buses, and how you get your kids places. I'm done. My guys are done. They're going to be both off and married in 2 weeks. So I've navigated that, and I will tell you it is a challenge. And as a child, one of 5 children, it was even more fun, because we were going so many different places. My wife and I had just 2 children. We decided a man-to-man defense was good enough. We didn't want to have to go to a zone. But it is a challenge that we love as parents. But you want your kids to be involved, but at the same time, how am I going to manage this?
I'm going to throw this to you. I want to get the New Orleans news out,
Yep.
and I'm having a lot of code put on the state code, put on the feed. That's pretty dry content, so I'm going to try to break this down while you get the New Orleans talking points out. This is important. Get ready for this.
Well, this actually does. I get no credit for this. This is was something that was tweeted yesterday from John Blair of the U.S. Court of Appeals of the Fifth Circuit. And it was a case, and I love this name. The first lead on the case is the White Spider Rental. But it was Airbnb owners in New Orleans versus the city of New Orleans. And it was involving 3 specific constitutional challenges for short-term rental. And the idea that came out and the push that came out was a logic piece about if you own a property, do you have to live there to be allowed to do a short-term rental? So, in other words, Albemarle County requires that you live in the property the majority of the year, and so does Charlottesville, in order to allow you to rent it short-term. Under 30 days is the code definition of short-term. Now, this case out of the Big Easy does not directly apply to Virginia, but the logic behind it does. Property rights, and it's actually a case worth reading because there was a clerk that had fun with it. Well, that doesn't work either. That you don't usually find in dry legal. I guess the South is a little different, but it was a much easier case to read than most cases. And the call, you could see if any of this sounds familiar. Many visitors to the city who stayed in short-term rentals were loud and did not clean up after themselves. The study also determined that the expansion of STRs into residential neighborhoods had led to a, quote, loss of neighborhood character, close quote, and collected, quote, anecdotal evidence that the booming STR market had made housing less affordable.
Short-term rental.
Short-term rental.
That sounds very familiar.
It sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
They weren't able to support that with any real facts, and the challenges of the case really came down to the idea that they were asking about advertising regulations and the like, but the city's residency requirement, the finding found, discriminates against interstate commerce. A law is discriminatory when it produces a different treatment of in-state and out-of-state economic interests that benefits the former and burdens the latter. Then there's a United Haulers citation. A law may discriminate on its face, in purpose, or in effect, but the only form of discrimination that implicates the dormant Commerce Clause is discrimination between substantially similarly entities. The residency requirement discriminates on its face on out-of-state property owners. So it's a violation of the Constitution's Interstate Commerce Clause. It will be fascinating to see if some libertarian lawyer somewhere takes this up and finds a willing Airbnb or short-term rental to move forward with this in Virginia. Because this ruling, while a federal ruling, only covers the 5th District and does not, and it cites Louisiana Constitution law rather than Virginia Constitution. But I believe the same argument can be made, and that was quoted, that was the tenor of Mr. Blair's comments, not providing legal advice because I'm not an attorney and I'm not quoting Mr. Blair directly as an attorney.
Did you stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night?
But I did not stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night.
I love Neil so much. Dude, you're completely right on the transportation. Brittany's gone. Brittany Gray, you've made the show better. 22.1-176 in the state code, transportation of pupils. A school board may provide for the transportation of pupils, but nothing herein contained shall be construed or requiring transportation of pupils, except when it comes to handicapped students.
Yep.
So Neil's right.
My goodness.
The school system does not, I didn't know that. I legitimately didn't know that. Well, I knew you were right all the time, but I didn't know that the school system did not have to provide transportation.
Every now and again, a blind pig finds an acorn.
You're 99.99999% of the time absolutely right. So did you hear that, Mom? I can't say moms and dads. Did you hear that, parents? The public school systems no longer is not the right phrase. According to state code, are not required to provide transportation. They can if they choose.
They may.
Yeah, they may.
The code language suggests that they may.
They may.
And taxpayers, for infinitum, have asked that they do.
Right.
That is different than being a demand.
So, okay, so let's take a deep dive on this. God, I love this show so much. So all these people, and me included, hell, I'm leading the charge here, that have been holding Dr. Matthew Haas and the school system, the school board, incredibly accountable with this following we have. They can legitimately say, state code says, we do not have to provide this transportation.
That's accurate. They probably won't keep their board seats if they were to say that, because you're represented by an elected board in Albemarle and Charlottesville.
But superintendent is not.
Superintendent is not, but superintendent only does, the superintendent acts on the board's actions.
But he did get a contract renewal.
He did, but it is, the board makes policy decisions. The school board, the superintendent implements those decisions and manages all staffing issues.
So the school board, and he's right. I'm literally thinking about this on the fly. My mind is blown here because I think the large majority of people, so everyone that's watching this program, I think, are equally in this scenario where their mind just got blown. People assume, or I don't even think the word assume applies, almost expect the transportation to be there from to and from school, just because, with a similar mindset with the interest rates. The interest rates have been so low for so long, the expectation was it's just going to be 3-4%. Now that they're going up, everyone's freaking out and it's chaos.
Perception is reality.
Perception is reality. We say that all the time. What is VMV Brands, our advertising agency, in the business of? Managing perception. So maybe the perception is that the school should get the kids to and from school on time, but technically by state code, they don't have to do this.
That's accurate.
So the school board, now to Neil's point, the elected school board would never say, hey, we don't have to get your kids to school on time, because as soon as one of those school board members do that, all hell would break loose.
One would anticipate that to be true.
Right?
Yes.
Because that would, and you talk about the wealth gap or discriminatory tendencies towards folks that don't have money, that would really, really, really impact the financial margin families.
It would, but it is. And so the question that logically follows is, should the state code mandate it?
This is a great comment from Brittany. Brittany, you just made the show better, the realtor. What is interesting is that they are not required to offer transportation services for children, but they did mandate masks on buses for kids and drivers, far longer on the bus than in the schools for an optional service. Dude, think about what she just said here. That's great. So you were required on Albemarle County school buses to wear the mask.
If you chose to ride the bus.
If you chose to ride the bus. And the bus is not required by state code to be offered as a transportation amenity for public schools. This is serious. This is great.
I'm in 10th grade and I'm learning logic. If the school chooses to provide bus transportation, and if the pupil chooses to ride the bus, then a mask is required.
Is that a fair requirement then?
You have two bailouts in there. The school could not run the bus, or you could not ride the bus.
Right?
Those are you free choice.
God, this is solid. Tara Savage, welcome to the program.
Hi, Tara.
Do we get to the point where they just say no? They say, Kevin says, and he's a CDL, the county may not have handled it the best, but it could have been far, far worse. Oh my gosh, dude, my mind is completely blown here. Would the schools get to the point, and obviously you don't have a crystal ball here, the bus driver scenario is not fixing itself. And as he's indicated, this is a nationwide problem. It's not unique to Albemarle and the city of Charlottesville. Are the public schools eventually going to say, hey, the transportation's not going to be an amenity we're going to offer?
Not an answer that I have.
Right. How could you have that answer? No one's going to have that answer there. Oh my goodness, dude. I'm rarely on this talk show at a loss for words. And today I am at a loss for words because I legitimately just knew something that went completely against everything that I've known in my 40 plus years on this planet. And he brought this to us.
Don't forget, it was verified by the viewers.
It's verified by the viewers who are showing the state code.
Yes.
And Brittany says, my aunt has been a bus driver for 35 years and can confirm that we are very close to the transportation not becoming an amenity with the public schools anymore. So folks, giddy up and get ready for that. We need to talk about, Tara just said, and this is what we talked about yesterday, Tara Savage with Kelly Jackson, it's time for privatization of transportation. Ask Neil his take on this. You've touched on this already. Why don't you offer that take again?
Sure. Bottom line is privatization is fine in the free market. Privatization of the buses, unless it was universal, would be inappropriate for the government to provide because it creates haves and have-nots. It creates a line of discrimination. If there are not enough buses and they have to choose who gets to ride and who doesn't get to ride beyond geographic location, that creates a discriminatory practice. I believe the private sector could solve this. That being said, I don't think it'll be cheap.
No, I don't think it's going to be cheap at all.
And looking at the Miami link that I sent you, it wasn't, I believe it was $100 a week.
$100 a week per kid?
Per kid.
That's astronomical.
Yeah, I don't see that as a solution.
No, that's not a solution. And that $100 a week price point was with the economies of scale, or was it a very narrow customer vertical or rider vertical?
This was out of Miami, Florida, which is a pretty big customer base, and it seemed like a decent size operation.
Damn, dude, this is heavy. This is heavy. We're not going to get to this many comments here. It's 11:31 here, and we got to prep for the I Love CVille show. Neil Williamson has undoubtedly crushed it today. Can you talk briefly or give the cliff notes? Philadelphia firm is Baltimore's most aggressive buyer of vacant row houses.
Sure. There was an article in the Baltimore Sun in the last week focused on a private sector company that is buying up and is one of the largest buyers in many of the low-income neighborhoods where buying up vacant buildings, refurbishing them, and renting them out to what is called Section 8 HUD rentals. There's some concern that with this consolidation of ownership, it becomes a slumlord, and that hasn't come to pass yet, but interestingly, in the article, it talks about a nonprofit that was trying to do much the same things, and they wouldn't buy the vacant lots in some of these areas because they were so far gone. And the concern was they're putting good money after bad, because if they don't have the rest of the community already built up, the row houses that they're refurbishing will only eventually just deteriorate. So it's an interesting dynamic. It's out there. It's a concern across the nation of corporate ownership of rental properties. I don't share much of that concern. I believe it's the free market finding a way to make it work. Generally speaking, these are bootstrap operations. In this case, it's a larger operation out of, I believe it's out of Boston, that's doing this work in Baltimore specifically. But they have boots on the ground and contractors on the ground making it happen, converting vacant buildings into affordable housing. I see it as a good thing.
Yeah, me too. Dude, one of the best shows we've literally ever done. Neil Williamson, president of the Free Enterprise Forum. How can we support you?
freeenterpriseforum.org. Click the donate button and give me money.
Please support the man, guys. He provides tremendous value for the community. Support the man. You crushed it today.
I'm out there swinging every day.
Dude, you crushed it today. And we'll give some props here for Mark Williamson, who's getting married in 8 days. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was fun.
Always.
Yeah. Judah Wickower, the director. I Love CVille show is up in good night. 54 minutes here with the general manager of the mall in the house, Athena Emons, to talk about the plans for Home Depot and Fashion Square Mall. 12:30, don't miss the show. Alex Erpy will also join us to talk markets and finance today. A lot to cover, guys. Thank you kindly for joining us on Real Talk with Keith Smith. Keith Smith is out of town. The show is archived at realtalkwithkeithsmith.com. So long, everybody. Neil, that was awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mike's going to go off here in T-minus 4 seconds.